stress. It's really basic, really simple, let's get her done kind of a thing. It's about 11 o'clock at night right now, about 10 till. So I kind of want to get this done so I can go to bed, and it'll take us about 10 minutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 1 cup measuring spoon, and I'm going to do 5 rough scoops of flour. And I'm hoping you can see how I do this. I just put it in there and shake. Mind you, this is not accurate. One of the things that I love about this bread is it is very forgiving. I'm going to go ahead and put my sourdough starter in there now. I love the smell of sourdough. This was fed last night, so about 24 hours ago. I like to keep a dry starter when I use my starter to make pancakes or waffles. This is my base, and so I like it to have that thickness. So this is a 1/2 cup measuring cup spoon, and I'm going to do 1 cup. I took 1 cup of starter out, so now I'm going to replace it with 1 cup of flour, and now I can put my flour away. And I'm just going to set the starter aside now. That's me planning ahead a little. Himalayan salt, I like to use Himalayan salt. I like to use about 2 teaspoons, and I like them to be a good teaspoon. This is where you get the bulk of your flavor from. I know the sourdough gives it a little bit of flavor, but really your salt is what most of your bread flavor comes from. I know that you can use too much salt and kill your starter that you're using your loaf for, but I haven't had any problems with the amount of salt that I use. The next thing that I like to use is I like to use sugar instead of honey, and I use about 1/4 cup. So I'm making 2 loaves. It's about 2 tablespoons per loaf. So I like to do about 1/4 cup of sugar, and I like to use sugar instead of honey. Raw local honey, we do have raw local honey, and I love it for its raw purposes, and when I cook it in bread, it's just destroying all the raw purposes. And also, honey is an antibacterial, so I don't know how well it would really work with the starter. I've used it before, and I had the results were fine. It still rose, and it still did its thing. I just kind of prefer to use sugar. I know it's not as good for you, but you're not getting any of the benefits of raw local honey when you're cooking it. And last but not least, I have 2 cups of water here. You want to use filtered water, or spring water, or you can take a pitcher of tap water and leave it sitting out on your counter overnight. Chlorine and chloramine will kill your starter. And the thing that I have found, I did used to use the tap water, city tap water. It's got chlorine, it's got fluoride, it's got all that junk in it, and I would let it sit out on the counter overnight, so it would, or all day, and it would evaporate all the chlorines out of it. Well, chloramine does not evaporate, and I don't know if they used that one time or for a week or so, I don't know, it killed my starter. So I kind of hesitate to use tap water anymore. If you have well water, you're in luck. I live in the Treasure Valley in Idaho. It's pretty dry here. It is spring, so it's not as dry as it can be in the summertime. But 2 cups of water is too much for me. The recipe calls for 2 cups of water. It's too much for my bread. I also don't like a super wet loaf because I'm not doing an artisan loaf. I'm going to start with 1.5 cups. I'm going to put my mixer on 1 or 2. Anything more than that is almost too high, and so I just let this go for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I will check it and watch it to make sure that all the flours are getting mixed in. And because I use a dryer hydration, sometimes I need a little bit more water, but not very often. I wanted to show you, it's still pretty dry down there. There's still flour towards the bottom. I'm sorry, you probably couldn't hear me. There's still flour towards the bottom, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. So it's been a couple minutes, and I just want to show you the consistency of my dough. It is still slightly tacky. It's malleable, and it's bumpy. It's not smooth, and that is okay. You want it to be tacky enough that your hands slightly stick to it, but not so tacky that you have a bunch of stuff on your hands. Okay, I have my stainless steel bowl. I mix it in here, but I don't let it raise in here. I use a porcelain bowl. And in my porcelain bowl, I take, this is avocado oil. I'll use avocado oil. I'll use extra virgin olive oil. You can use ghee. You can use butter. Anything that's going to grease this is good. And you're going to want a couple tablespoons. So you're going to want it to be a little on the oily side. And I take my smooth side. I call this my smooth side. I know it's not all that smooth yet. You'll see tomorrow it'll be smoother, but it's smoother than that side. So I take my smooth side and I just kind of roll it around in there, get it oily, set it on top, and then I have plastic wrap, which I don't love to use plastic. It works. And I wrap it like this, and I'm going to set it out on my counter overnight. And now that we have the bread dough done, set aside, we've got our 1 cup of flour that we have in our starter. I haven't added any water into it yet. And again, I like to use the filtered water. Spring water works good. I have 1 cup in here. I'm only going to start with half of a cup. I want a stiff, dry dough, so I do it about 50% hydration. And I will go more into that when I do a video on making your own starter. So there's about a half a cup. I'm going to take my little spatula here that I used with the bread or with the pulling the starter out. I'm just going to go around and clean up the sides a little bit, and I'm going to strong arm it and get it all stirred in. You want to kind of get it incorporated with the stuff that's down there on the corners. Try and get the stuff off the sides. Get you a good stiff dough in there. Okay, that is very stiff. A lot of people with 100% hydration really like it towards the runnier, and that's great. I like it dry. I put the lid on that, and I'm going to set it over in its corner, and I will be back with you in the morning to show you how this turns out and what to do next. Good morning. Let my bread sit out, and look, I have plastic on it. See? I don't know if you can see that little guy right there. That is why I plastic it, because they love sourdough. This is my starter the next day. Look how nice and bubbly that is. Isn't that beautiful? One of these days I will show you waffles and knead. 2 big things you want to think about. First of all, grease your pans. I also line mine with parchment. They're cast iron, and so I'm a little cautious that I'm not putting too much metal against it, but I've never had problems with them. I'm going to take my plastic wrap, and it does have grease on this side, so I'm going to lay it aside. I'm not going to toss it because I can use this for my loaf pans while they're rising. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to guesstimate, make sure your hands are clean. I'm going to guesstimate a half of a loaf. I could be more precise and I could stick it in the scale and try to make it perfectly even, but that's kind of close enough. So my favorite way is I just like to fold it. Look how smooth that is now. Remember last night when I was showing you the smooth side that was really not very smooth at all? When you ferment it with your sourdough starter, your yeasts and bacteria do a lot of work for you, like kneading. You don't have to knead this bread because the process of souring and the fermentation does all that work for you. I do kind of pinch my little pieces in, and I'm going to just shape it by hand and kind of get it as close to like that as I can. And I'm going to lay that in there, and that one is ready. I love that one because it is fast. So the other way I like to do it is I will roll it into a ball, and I don't flour my surface. So I will kind of try to shape this a little bit rectangular. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to start pulling and rolling at the same time to keep it tight. And see that right there? I don't know if you can see that. That right there. I'm going to turn it over and try rolling it some more this way so that I can seal all that up. You don't want those kind of pockets in your bread. At least not that I've noticed. It seems to put those holes inside your bread that when you go to slice it, it kind of rips apart. All right, so I'm going to roll it from this side. Okay, and now I'm going to take these pieces here and I'm going to just kind of pinch them together so that, again, when you go to slice your bread, it doesn't rip apart. I'm going to put the seam on the bottom and I'm going to grab this outer edge and I'm going to kind of tuck it and pinch. And same over here. I'm going to grab this outer edge. I'm going to tuck it and pinch. And now I have a little bit, I mean, I guess the whole purpose of this one is it gets air bubbles out. It gets it a little more uniform. And I'll show you in the pan. So if you look at this one, this is the one that I rolled. To see how it's kind of even all the way across. You look at the one I did by hand, and it's not so even, and it kind of has these little swoops on the end, and you'll see as I raise them and cook them, the one that I do by hand has a lot more of a curve to it, whereas the ones that I do rolled have a little bit more straight across. So it's just preference, and it's not important to me that it's perfect like that all the time. Let's do this. I'm going to put my plastic wrap that I used on the bowl, and I'm going to set it over my pans now. I'm going to put these off in the corner or back away. You don't want sunlight on them, and you want it to be free of drafts. This is the bread now. It's been 2 hours. This one is the loaf that I did by hand. And if you look at it from this angle, it's kind of swoopy on the ends. This is the one I rolled, and it has just slightly less swoop. So now that my bread has risen about this far, 375 degrees for 30 minutes. I'll be back when I'm done baking it. Timer just went off. See the little split? So now that we have the bread baked, I like to take a little bit of butter with my silicone brush or any kind of a brush. I've used paper towel. I just butter the top, make it shiny. It kind of leaves a nice little flavor, add a little bit of salty flavor type thing to the top of the bread. And there you go. 2 loaves of bread. I will show you when they cool off how they look when I cut them. One of the things I like to do is take a piece of bread cloth, flour sack cloth, and then I just cover it, and then the covering it will kind of help soften that crust a little bit so it's not too crusty. And I will see you when this has a chance to cool. Okay, so it's done baking, done cooling, done fermenting. Now we get the joy of cutting it. And I'll show you what it looks like inside. So that is the crumb. Inside it's very soft. Makes great peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So until next time on A Fork with